I never expected my life to change so drastically in such a short amount of time. At 23, I was living in my grandmother's old house, a place she'd left to me when she passed away. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, well maintained, and nestled in a quiet neighborhood where you could still hear the birds chirping in the morning. My name is Leslie, and back then, everything seemed pretty simple. I had a steady job, a roof over my head, and what I thought was a caring family: my mom, my stepdad, and my younger half sister, Piper, who had just turned 18. They lived closer to the city in a modern house, though they were still struggling with a hefty mortgage that would take them many more years to pay off. One Sunday afternoon, my mom stopped by for our weekly coffee. She always had that look when she was about to drop a bombshell. "Leslie, honey, can we talk?" Her voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying excitement. "You know, your stepdad and I have been talking. This house of yours, it's exactly what we've always dreamed of. The quiet location, the garden space. It's perfect." I listened, intrigued but confused, wondering where this was headed. "And I know your commute to work is pretty rough from here," she continued. "Our house is so much closer to your office." That's when she laid it out. They wanted to swap homes. They'd move into my grandmother's house, and I would take their place in the city. "Think about it," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You'd save so much time on that commute. Plus, the house is bigger, more modern, and your stepdad and I have always wanted to live in a place like this." At first, it seemed like a great idea. Their house was newer with an updated kitchen, more space, and the location would make my commute half as long. But my mind instantly went to the details. "What about the paperwork?" "What about the paperwork?" I asked, wary. "Shouldn't we get something in writing?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, we're family. Why waste money on lawyers? You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." I hesitated for a moment, but she sounded so confident, and part of me wanted to believe that everything would be fine. Plus, they seemed genuinely excited, and I was flattered that they wanted my house. "So," I agreed. The move happened quickly. I settled into the city house, making it my own. Each month, I faithfully paid the mortgage, sometimes sending extra money to pay it off faster. I also put money into fixing up the house, replacing old appliances, and giving several rooms a fresh look. Everything felt perfect. My daily commute was shorter. The house was modern, and I thought my family and I had a solid arrangement. For 4 years, that's how things went. I made the mortgage payments without fail, often contributing extra when I could. And then came a business trip that would change everything. It seemed like any other trip: 2 weeks of meetings, presentations, and hotel rooms. But when I returned home, nothing could have prepared me for what I found waiting for me. The day I came back from that business trip, everything felt off. The air was chilly, the kind of crisp evening air that always made me feel like something was about to happen. My Uber dropped me off at the end of my driveway, and as I wheeled my suitcase up, I noticed something strange. The porch light was on. I hadn't left it on, and there were voices coming from inside. "What the hell?" I muttered under my breath, confused. I tried to open the door with my key, but it didn't fit. I tried again, more urgently this time, but the lock didn't budge. Panic started to rise in my chest. The locks had been changed. I was still trying to figure out what was going on when the door swung open. There stood my sister Piper, now 22, wearing my favorite fuzzy slippers and giving me a look like I was some unwelcome solicitor. "You're back," she said casually, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk tugging at her lips. Behind her, I could see a tall guy lounging on my couch, his feet up on the coffee table. I recognized him immediately, her new husband. I stood there, frozen, my suitcase still in my hand, trying to process what was happening. "What the hell is going on here?" I managed to say. "Your stuff's in the garage," she said, still inspecting her nails like I wasn't standing there completely confused and furious. "Piper, what are you talking about? This is my house." She barely looked up. "Not anymore. Mom and Dad gave it to us as a wedding present. We're living here now." The world felt like it tilted under my feet. My thoughts scrambled. "They gave you my house?" I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stare at her. "Are you insane? I've been paying the mortgage on this house for 4 years. Piper rolled her eyes. The same dismissive gesture I'd seen so many times from our mother. "Yeah, about that," she said, waving a hand in my direction. "That's not really my problem." I felt the heat of rage building inside me. Not your problem? The years of favoritism, the constant reminders that Piper always got what she wanted, while I had to make do with less, all of it came rushing back in that moment. The new iPhone while I was still using a flip phone. The brand new car for her 16th birthday while I took the bus. The expensive college tuition that she didn't have to work for, while I worked my ass off just to get through community college. Where am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Piper shrugged, a look of pure indifference on her face. Not my problem. Get a hotel or something. Just don't come back here. The door slammed shut in my face before I could say another word. From behind it, I could hear her laughing, the sound of her and her husband settling into my home, my house, the one I'd spent 4 years paying for, fixing up, making my own. I didn't even remember walking back to my car. I don't know how I managed to drive to my parents' house. All I could think about was the same painful pattern that had always existed between us. The favoritism, the constant manipulation. It wasn't just a new phone or a fancy bag this time. This time, it was my home, my life. Everything I'd worked for. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, the one I'd swapped with them years ago. I stormed up the path, my fists clenched, ready for a fight. The porch light cast long shadows across the garden, the same garden I had tended to when it was still my grandmother's house. My heart pounded as I reached the door and knocked hard, my fist stinging from the impact. "Mom, open up! We need to talk about what Piper just did!" I shouted. I could hear movement inside, soft whispers, the shuffle of footsteps, but the door didn't open. Instead, I heard my mom's muffled voice through the door. "Go away." I couldn't have heard that right. "What? Mom, open the door! Piper just locked me out of my house, the house I've been paying the mortgage on for 4 years. That's not your house anymore." My stepdad's voice joined in, cold and dismissive. "This is our house now." My stomach dropped. I felt like the ground was giving way beneath me. "What do you mean, this is my house? Grandma left it to me." There was a long pause. Then my mom spoke, and her voice was as stern as I'd ever heard it. "Go rent an apartment or something. Stop making everyone nervous with your drama." I pressed my palms against the door, trying to steady myself, trying to stop the rage that was threatening to break me down. "Making you nervous? Are you kidding me? You've thrown me out of my house and now you won't even let me in to talk about it? We've invested a lot in this house," my mom snapped, her voice cold. "We've done renovations, improvements. What about all the money I spent fixing up your house?" "My house?" I screamed, no longer caring if anyone heard. The new appliances, the remodeled bathroom, the 4 years of mortgage payments. "That's what you're calling an investment? How is it different?" I demanded. "How is it different when you planned this all along? Get me to pay your mortgage while you lived in my house, then give my place to Piper and keep Grandma's house for yourselves." Great plan, huh? The silence that followed was chilling. And when my mom spoke again, it was flat, emotionless. "You need to leave now, Leslie. This is our house, and we don't want you here." I felt something inside me snap. All the years of bitterness, the manipulation, the gaslighting, it all came crashing down in that moment. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "Actually, Mom, you're wrong about one thing. This is my house. Legally, the deed is still in my name. Grandma left it to me, remember? And since you're so fond of kicking people out of their homes, maybe it's time." I returned the favor. My stepdad's angry growl was the last thing I heard before I turned and walked away. I had nowhere to go, but I knew what I had to do. I had nowhere to go, but a part of me knew I was done being the nice one, done being the doormat for my family's manipulation. I didn't have a place to crash that night, but I wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. I ended up at a cheap hostel, suitcase still in hand from my business trip. I tried to shake off the anger, but it was like a storm that kept battering at my mind. I needed a plan. I needed to take action. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control over my life. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I pulled out my phone and started looking up lawyers. The more I thought about what had happened, the more it ate at me. The house, the money, the years I spent paying the mortgage, thinking I was helping my family, only to find out they'd been scheming behind my back. I wasn't going to let them win. The lawyer I found, Mr. Thompson, didn't mess around. I explained everything to him, the house swap, the payments, the eviction. He didn't hesitate. We'll take care of this, he said with the kind of confidence I hadn't heard in years. Within 2 days, he had all the paperwork ready. Eviction notices, legal documents, the works. I arrived back at my old house, ready for the next step. I had been to my parents' house, heard them deny everything, treated me like a stranger. I had expected a fight, but what I didn't expect was how quickly the situation escalated. Mr. Thompson and I stood on the porch, the cold wind biting at our faces. He knocked on the door with sharp, professional raps, the sound echoing in the quiet evening. Mom opened the door. Her face paled when she saw the legal documents in Mr. Thompson's hands. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice crisp and businesslike. "I'm here on behalf of your daughter, Leslie, the legal owner of this property. I'm serving you with an eviction notice." My stepdad appeared behind her, his face red with anger. "You can't do this!" he shouted. Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. "Actually, we can. You have 3 days to vacate the premises. If you fail to comply, we'll be forced to involve the police and pursue legal action for forcible eviction." I stood quietly, watching my mother's face cycle through shock, anger, and then, finally, fear. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. She tried to catch my eye, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I was done being manipulated. "Leslie, honey," her voice softened, trying to win me back with sweetness. "We can talk about this." I didn't say anything. My jaw tightened as I cut her off. The time for talking was before you locked me out of my house and gave it to Piper. 3 days. That was all they had. And in those 3 days, I didn't know if I could stand the waiting. Every time my phone rang, I held my breath. But to my surprise, they actually complied. The morning of the 4th day, I got the call from Mr. Thompson. "The house is clear," he said. "They've moved out." I couldn't believe it. After all the drama, the lies, the manipulation, they had actually packed up and left. It felt surreal. I arrived at my old house, ready to finally take back what was mine. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw the moving van parked out front, and my mom was standing in the driveway, staring at me with red-rimmed eyes. I almost didn't recognize her, but I knew she had the same look as when she used to get caught in a lie, a mixture of guilt and defiance. She spoke first, her voice bitter. "You're no daughter of mine," she hissed. Tears streamed down her face. "You're a traitor after everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I laughed bitterly, my words sharp with anger. "You mean using me to pay your mortgage for 4 years while you plan to steal my house?" "Yeah, thanks for that." Mom didn't say anything else. She climbed into the car without another word. I watched her drive away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. The house was mine again. Inside, it was a mess. Drawers left open, things thrown about. But nothing was broken. Nothing major, anyway. As I stood in my grandmother's living room, my living room now, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was done. It was over. And for the first time since all this began, I smiled. I looked around at the chaos, at the things I'd inherited, at the place I'd built my life around. It was mine, and no one could take that away from me. I thought back to all the money I'd poured into my parents' house, the new appliances, the renovations. I had treated that house like it was mine, believing that one day it would be. I had worked so hard for it, but now I realized the real kick in the teeth was the mortgage. For years, I had sent payments, often more than required, thinking I was investing in my future. I did the math. There was about $50,000 left to pay off. 2 more years, and it would have been fully paid for. All that extra money, all those extra payments. And then the memory hit me, one I had shoved aside back when the house swap happened. But now, it felt like it was staring me right in the face. Mom had sat at her new kitchen table, stirring her coffee with that innocent look she always wore when she wanted something. "Leslie, honey," she'd said back then, "I've been thinking, since we're living here now, maybe you should just transfer the house deed to us. You know, make it official. We'll sign our house over to you once the mortgage is paid off." I had a better idea. "Why don't we do it the other way around?" I'd suggested. You can transfer the mortgage to my name now, and I'll keep making the payments. Officially, then I'll sign over Grandma's house to you right away." I remembered the way her face had changed, just for a second, before she covered it up with a smile. "Oh, no," she'd said quickly. "That would be so complicated with the bank. Better to wait until the mortgage is paid off. Then we can do a clean swap of both houses." I should have seen it then, but I hadn't. If I'd signed over Grandma's house, I would have had nothing. No backup plan. No legal claim to either property. I would have been homeless. While my family enjoyed both houses, I would have been left with nothing. But I had the sense to keep this house legally mine. And now, I was finally free. I wasn't just taking back my home. I was taking back control of my life. Even after everything had been sorted, even with the house back in my hands, it was hard to shake off the weight of what had happened. I was still processing the shock and betrayal, trying to find a way to put the pieces back together. But there was no denying one thing. I had learned a lesson the hard way. As I sat in my grandmother's rocking chair, the one that had always been a quiet comfort, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led up to this moment. All the years of paying the mortgage, believing I was making a wise investment in my future, and trusting that my family would never betray me. They had made promises, and I had kept my side of the bargain, only to be blindsided. The most painful part was how everything seemed so clear in hindsight. The money I had spent more than required, always sending extra, thinking I was being smart. The constant sacrifices I made, all the while believing that this house, this home, would eventually be mine, free and clear. But in reality, my family had been using me the whole time, like a convenient ATM to fund their own lifestyles. I had trusted them. I had loved them. But now, I knew the truth. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. I thought about my mom's manipulation, how she'd worked to keep me compliant. The way she had tried to make it sound so reasonable back when we'd agreed to the swap. "Oh, it'll be so easy," she'd said. "Just a little paperwork." But I should have known better. I should have realized the truth before I got involved in their scheme. I had heard those words so many times before, from my stepdad, from my mom, even from Piper. We're family. But what did that really mean when it was used to control me, to manipulate me into doing things I didn't want to do? I shook my head, forcing myself to push those thoughts aside. This wasn't the time to dwell on the past. I had to keep moving forward. But it was hard not to feel a lingering sense of anger. I had worked for everything I had, and they had taken it all from me only to turn around and leave me homeless, shut out of the place I had called home. But I was done. Done being the one who always had to be the good daughter. Done making sacrifices while they played their games. I had put my foot down, and now it was time to rebuild. The phone call came 3 days after I'd stopped paying the mortgage. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I didn't want to answer, but part of me knew I had to. I had to hear what she had to say. I couldn't avoid it forever, I answered reluctantly. "Where's the mortgage payment?" Her voice was sharp, like I was some delinquent tenant who hadn't paid rent. Not her daughter who had spent years helping them with their finances. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You're seriously calling to ask me for money right now?" "Of course I am." "You need to pay the mortgage," she snapped, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I clenched my fists, trying to keep the rage from bubbling over. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You kick me out of the house I've been paying for, give it to Piper and her new husband, and you still expect me to make the payments?" There was a pause, a silence that stretched on for a moment too long. "Of course," she said, as if it was all perfectly reasonable. "That house belongs to Piper now." I cut her off, my voice rising. "Then let Piper pay for it. She lives there now, doesn't she? Let her take care of it." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then her voice grew shrill. "Piper can't pay the mortgage. She just graduated college. She's not even working yet, and they just had that beautiful wedding." I cut her off again, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. "Not my problem. You gave her my house. Let her take responsibility for it." I felt her frustration on the other side of the line. "Fine, then we'll just move back into your house," she threatened. I actually laughed out loud, the sound almost hollow. "Try it, and I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "I've already evicted you once. Want to go for round 2? The silence on the other end was deafening. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but there was also something else, a sense of power, a sense of relief. I wasn't the scared little girl anymore. I wasn't the one who would take whatever they handed me. You can't just stop paying, she said, her voice turning almost pleading. I laughed again, this time bitterly. We had an agreement, sure, but you broke it the moment you gave my house to Piper. Besides, you're almost done paying it off anyway, right? What is it? About $50,000 left? Another long silence. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. It's more than that, she said, her voice small, almost guilty. I waited for her to say the number, but I already knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. How much more? I asked, dreading the answer. About $150,000, she said quietly. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My coffee mug slipped from my hand, clattering against the counter. It didn't break, but it felt like the floor had just disappeared beneath me. What? My voice was barely above a whisper. That's impossible. I've been paying extra for 4 years. I put in thousands more than the required payments. What did you do with the extra money? The silence that followed was chilling. I could almost hear her trying to find the words, to come up with an explanation. Well, she finally said, casually, like she was discussing the weather, we had expenses. You know, your stepdad and I needed a vacation after all the stress of moving. We went to Europe for 3 weeks. Paris, Rome, Madrid, beautiful cities. She sighed dreamily. Then there was Piper's college tuition. You know how expensive private universities are these days. And of course, we had to renovate the house. I couldn't breathe. For years, I had sent extra money to help pay down the mortgage. I thought I was doing the right thing, planning for my future. But instead, my mom and stepdad had used that money for vacations and personal expenses. You took my money, I whispered, my voice shaking with disbelief. And you spent it on vacations? Don't be so dramatic, Leslie, she said dismissively. We're family. We just redistributed the funds where they were needed most. I hung up before I could say anything else. My hands trembling so badly I dropped the phone. For an hour, I just sat there in my grandmother's rocking chair, shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. Finally, I blocked their numbers, all of them. Mom, Dad, Piper, done. But, of course, it wasn't that easy. It didn't take long for them to come looking for me again. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was a blocked number, but I knew exactly who it was. I almost didn't pick up, but deep down, I knew I had to confront them. I had to see how far they would push it this time. When I answered, it was my mom's voice, shrill and desperate. Leslie, open this door right now. We need to talk about the mortgage payment. I felt a calm settle over me. The door was locked and I wasn't about to open it. Not for her, not for anyone. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice steady. I'm not paying another cent. You broke our agreement, and I'm done. I could hear my stepdad's voice in the background, angry and demanding. You're responsible for the payments, Leslie. I stood firm, not backing down an inch. Actually, I'm not. You gave my house to Piper, so let her take care of the mortgage. I've already taken care of you for far too long. You can't just stop paying. You have to take care of this. My mom's voice grew frantic, as if the world was collapsing around her. I leaned back against the wall, feeling a strange sense of peace despite everything. You know what? I have bank statements showing every payment I made, emails, and text messages about our house swap agreement. I also have evidence of fraud. You're the ones who took advantage of me, and now you're going to face the consequences. I paused for a moment, letting the silence hang heavy between us. If you keep harassing me, I'll take you to court. And trust me, I can afford a long, expensive legal battle a lot better than you can. Want to test me? They didn't say anything else. No threats. No apologies. Just the sound of their heavy footsteps retreating. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence on the other side of the door. It was over. I had finally taken control. A week passed before they tried again. This time, I heard pounding on my door, followed by a string of angry voices. Open the door, Leslie. We need to talk. I didn't move. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I stood behind the door, my hand steady on the handle, waiting for them to leave. They yelled for a while, but I didn't let myself get pulled into their drama. Not this time. When the shouting finally stopped, I heard their car drive away. I felt a heavy weight lift from my chest. I had stood my ground, and now they knew I wasn't going to be their fallback option anymore. But that wasn't the end of it. The phone calls kept coming. The texts, the emails. My mom sent me a picture of an apple pie, as if that would make everything go back to normal. They wanted me to come back, to fix things, to make everything better. But I wasn't going to fall for it again. Then, about a month later, I got a call from my cousin Tracy. "Leslie, you might want to know this," she said, her voice low. "Your parents are in trouble. They've burned through all their savings, even their retirement fund. And Piper, she had a huge fight with them when they told her she needed to start paying the mortgage." I listened quietly as Tracy filled me in on the details. Apparently, Piper was furious, screaming about how they'd promised her a free house. The neighbors even heard the yelling. Piper wasn't going to lift a finger to help, and now my parents were facing the consequences of their actions. "They've even started asking the family for loans," Tracy continued. "Uncle Bob said they tried to refinance, but the bank denied them. Aunt Mary heard they took out personal loans for Piper's car, the Mercedes she got for graduation. And get this, they even borrowed money for her honeymoon, paid for her and her husband to spend 2 weeks in the Maldives." I sat in silence, letting the weight of Tracy's words sink in. It wasn't just that they had lied to me, they had taken out loans and run up debts, all while I was struggling to make my payments. They were in way over their heads, and now they were paying the price. A few weeks after that, I got another call from my friend Sarah. She worked at the bank, and I could tell something was on her mind. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she said cautiously, "but I thought you should know. The bank sent your parents a demand letter last week. They're 3 months behind on payments now." I swallowed hard. "Let me guess. They're about to lose the house?" She nodded, her voice sympathetic. "If they don't come up with the money soon, the bank will foreclose." I already knew what would happen next. They would show up at my door, tears in their eyes, apologizing for everything. They would beg for my help, promise to make things right. They would make their usual empty promises. But I wasn't about to fall for it again. I had learned the hard way. They had made their choices: multiple mortgages, personal loans, lavish trips, and expensive cars. Now it was time for them to face the consequences. I wasn't going to fix their mistakes. Not this time. I looked around at my grandmother's house, my house now, the walls that had stood strong for generations, the garden she had planted, now in full bloom. I thought about everything she had wanted for me. A secure future. A life built on hard work and dedication, not one built on lies and manipulation. Aunt Mary had called me a week ago, trying to get me to help. "Aren't you going to do something?" she'd asked. "They need help." I stared out the window at the irises my grandmother had planted, their purple petals bright against the greenery. She'd always told me, "You reap what you sow." I wondered what my family would harvest from the seeds of betrayal they'd planted. In the end, I knew what I had to do. It was time for me to move on, to leave the past behind and focus on my future. I thought about the 4 years I spent paying their mortgage, all the extra payments I made, and the toll it had taken on me. I thought about how they had taken advantage of my generosity and trust, using me to fix their problems. And I thought about the way I had felt when they locked me out of my house, the house I had worked so hard to make a home. But I was done. I wasn't going to fix their mistakes anymore. They had made their bed, and now they would have to lie in it. My life was mine to live now. And this time, I wasn't sharing. The weeks that followed were quiet, at least in terms of drama from my family. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders as I finally settled into my life again. The tension that had been hanging over me for so long slowly faded, replaced by a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I didn't hear from my parents for a while after the final confrontation. The last time they'd tried to force their way back into my life, I had stood my ground. They'd left, and for the first time, I felt like I had some control over my own life again. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One day, while I was out working in the garden, my grandmother's garden, now mine, my neighbor, Miss S. Thompson, stopped by. She was one of the few people who had always treated me with kindness, even when I was going through all the mess with my family. She had been watching the whole thing unfold from her porch, but she never said anything. She just gave me space. Leslie, she called out, smiling softly as she approached. You've done a lot of work around here. Looks beautiful. I wiped my hands on my jeans and turned to her. Thanks, Mrs. Thompson. It's been a lot of work, but it feels good to make it my own. She nodded knowingly. You're a strong woman, Leslie. I've seen what you've been through, and I admire the way you've handled it. It's not easy, standing up for yourself, especially when it comes to family. I smiled, grateful for her words. Yeah, it's been a rough few months, but I think I'm finally figuring it all out. I don't need to keep letting them control me. She gave me a soft chuckle. We all have our limits, don't we? And sometimes the hardest part is realizing when it's time to let go. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in my bones. Letting go of my family, of their expectations and manipulation, had been the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the most freeing. I didn't hear from them again until one morning, about 3 months after they'd left. I was at work, sitting at my desk, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Piper. Leslie, I know things have been crazy, but we need to talk. Please, can you meet us? I felt my stomach twist. Piper's message was full of guilt and uncertainty, but it didn't change anything. I wasn't interested in hearing them try to justify their actions anymore. I had made it clear where I stood, but the message kept lingering in my mind. I didn't want to leave things unresolved, but at the same time, I didn't owe them anything. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat back in my chair and thought about everything I had been through, the lies, the manipulation, the way they had turned my life upside down. But I also thought about how far I had come. I had taken control of my own future. I had rebuilt my life, and now I wasn't going to let anyone come in and ruin that again. The next day, I heard from my cousin Tracy again. This time, she wasn't calling with any updates about my parents. She had a simple question. Leslie, have you thought about your future? About what comes next? I paused, caught off guard by the question. What came next? I had spent so much time just surviving, so much time focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, that I hadn't really thought about it. But now, as I sat there, I realized Tracy was right. I had come so far, but there was still so much more to do. I've been thinking about it, I said slowly. I want something more. I want to build my own life, a life that's mine, not one that's tied to my past, to my family. Tracy smiled through the phone. Good, it's time to take that next step, Leslie. You've earned it. I felt a sense of determination settle in. I wasn't going to let my past define me. I wasn't going to let my family's mistakes weigh me down. It was time to focus on myself, on what I wanted, on what I deserved. Over the next few weeks, I began to make plans. I looked into new career opportunities, considering what I truly wanted out of my work life. I took more time for myself, spent time with friends who supported me, and focused on what made me happy. I even started taking classes in something I'd always been interested in, something just for me, not for anyone else. My relationship with my parents never fully healed. They tried to reach out a few more times, sending messages and leaving voicemails. But I had already made my peace. I couldn't go back to the way things were, not after everything they had put me through. I had learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about respect, trust, and mutual care. And they had shown me none of that, so I let them go. I still thought about them sometimes. I still wondered how they were doing, what kind of mess they had gotten themselves into next. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for them anymore. I wasn't going to let their choices ruin my future. The days passed, and slowly, life began to feel like it was on the right track again. I was no longer looking over my shoulder, wondering what drama would come next. I was no longer consumed by anger and resentment. Instead, I found myself focused on the future, my future. The one I would build on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but I had made it. I had taken back my life, and now it was mine to live. Story 2. Helen Collins is my name. In a little town that most people have probably never heard of, I work at the local library and I'm 29 years old. I have a straightforward life. Some may find it too easy, but it's mine. I've always been a quiet person who enjoys the companionship of books more than the cacophonous world outside. The library is my shelter. I think it's ideal, even if it's a little ancient structure with groaning flooring and shelves that have seen better days. I turn on the lights, open the library doors at 8 a.m. every day and inhale the comforting smell of books. It is a regimen that is always the same. My grandma reared me after my parents died when I was a small child. She was a good-hearted woman who constantly pushed me to read and study. But she's also gone now, and I'm by myself. No close relatives, no siblings. Me and my little universe alone. Good morning, Helen. A frequent visitor, Mr. Jenkins, enters and says hello to me. He is an old man who reads history books all day long. Mr. Jenkins, good morning. The next supply of history books came yesterday. I've reserved them for you, I smile in response. My sweetheart, you know me too well. He laughs and shuffles over to the assigned shelf. This is how the day unfolds, with well-known faces appearing and disappearing. I direct Mr. Thompson to the science fiction area, suggest a romance book to Miss S. Harrison, and assist a group of children in selecting books for their school project. Although it's a tranquil existence, I enjoy it. The regularity and predictability give me comfort. Then everything changed one day. Jack entered my life one day while searching for a book. He wasn't your typical library type, though, as I could tell. His smart clothing and self-assured gait made him look out of place. Are you able to locate a book for me? Naturally, his voice was enticing and smooth as he requested, What are you trying to find? I replied, trying to keep my composure. It's a new book. I think of it as The Great Gatsby. I handed him the book and said, Right this way, guiding him to the classics section. I felt a thrill when our hands momentarily touched. Even though it was just a touch, it stuck in my head. He read my name badge and responded, Thank you, Helen. My name is Jack. Jack, it's good to meet you. Everything started with that brief contact. The start of what I believed would be a lifelong love. The start of a voyage that will separate me from my familiar tranquil existence into a world of treachery and mayhem. What I now know, I wish I had known then. Maybe things would have been different. However, there is no warning label for life. We sometimes have to learn things the hard way. Jack started going to the library more regularly after that initial encounter. Every time he came in, he would ask for a book recommendation and then spend a few minutes talking with me, which was strange because he didn't seem like the reading kind. He entered the room one day while I was fumbling with a box of recently delivered books. Do you need help with that? He volunteered, walking over. That would be fantastic. Regards. As we arranged the books on the shelf, I stated with relief. He inquired, What drew you to work in a library, Helen? I gave a shrug. I have always been an avid reader. You know, they're like friends. In addition, this place is peaceful. He chuckled. I noticed that. It feels like a whole different reality. With every visit, our talks became longer. I discovered out that Jack worked in his family's business, something having to do with real estate. He was simple to talk to, and I felt like someone actually cared about me for the first time in a long time. Then he shocked me one day. Helen, would you want to have supper with me tonight? His eyes were full of hope as he asked. I was surprised. Like going on a date? Like going on a date, yes. He grinned. I paused. There was something about him that made me want to say yes, even though this was new to me. I would enjoy that, all right, I answered, attempting to speak steadily. We visited a little eatery in the city. It was comfortable yet not ostentatious. We discussed everything and nothing at all. And for a few hours, I forgot about my typically alone life. I had a really great time tonight, Helen, Jack stated as he walked home. You're not like the individuals I often encounter. I simply smiled as I was at a loss for words. I'd like to see you again, he added. Is that acceptable? I gave a nod. I would enjoy it, yes. We began seeing each other more frequently after that. We would go for walks or he would take me out to supper. It was pleasant. For once, I had the impression that I belonged to something greater, a world beyond books and solitude. I quickly fell deeply in love with him. He made me feel unique and was nice and considerate. And when he proposed, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I replied. I regret not seeing the warning flags in the past. I regret not seeing that the attractiveness was really a front for something far less agreeable. However, love has a way of making you blind and unable to see the warning flags. I was also really in love, at least I believed I was. Following Jack's engagement to me, things began to shift. It started with his parents. They disapproved of me right away. Since I didn't come from a wealthy family, they believed I was beneath their son. They obviously didn't like me when I initially met them. We were at their place for supper, and I was worried. It was a huge, elegant house. Nothing like what I was used to. Helen, this is my mother, Margaret. And Richard, my dad. Jack gave the introduction. It's good to meet you, I said, attempting to grin. Margaret gave me a thorough examination. So, you're the chick that works at the library? Yes, I am, I answered, getting smaller every second. Richard added his voice. Jack. Couldn't you find someone more suitable? I had the need to crawl into a hole. The supper was long and unpleasant. They expressed their opinion that I wasn't suitable for their son. However, Jack defended me, which increased my affection for him. They insisted on a prenuptial agreement prior to our wedding. It was only a formality, they claimed. I consented without protesting since I had little to lose. After we were married, I moved in with Jack, who lived with his parents. They pretended that it was still theirs, even though they had given it to him as a wedding present. His parents frequently dropped by without warning. They would enter and begin directing me. Helen, make us some coffee. As soon as Margaret entered, she would make demands, and I would comply silently. I didn't want to stir things up. One day, Margaret pointed to the TV and said, Remember Helen, in case of divorce? You can't claim this. That was how everything was. They never stopped reminding me that I didn't own anything in the home. Jack also began to change. I didn't fall in love with him. His folks began making jokes about me, and he began to join in. I was having trouble deciding what to wear to a family gathering one evening. I asked Jack for his thoughts. He laughed and remarked, This one makes you look less drab. I was wounded. It seemed like he was a different person with his parents. He no longer advocated for me. Rather, he shared their laughter. The house was a tiring place to live. I felt like an unwelcome visitor and an outsider. I kept expecting things to improve, but instead, they grew worse. I was affected by the tension. I began to feel sick to my stomach, negative ones. Despite my best efforts to ignore them, I eventually passed out at the library. In the hospital, I awoke. According to the doctor, stress was the cause. I spent a few days in the hospital. Jack didn't visit. He never even gave a call. I was so isolated. Then a notary visited my room one day. He had some news. I hardly recalled my great aunt, but she was dead. She had also bequeathed her riches to me. $30 million. It seemed unbelievable to me. With money like that, I wasn't really sure what to do. All of a sudden, though, I was more than just the poor library girl. Jack and his parents were instantly beaming with joy and sweetness when they learned that they had come to see. We're so delighted for you, darling. Margaret spoke, her tone brimming with phony worry. We are a family, yes. We ought to help one another, Richard added. I didn't purchase it. The shift was too drastic. Upon their departure, they were conversing outside my room, and I heard it. They were unaware that I was listening. What an idiot she is. Do you think we're lucky? Jack chuckled. Jack, we have to make sure she doesn't abandon you. Perhaps you ought to bear her a kid who will keep her bound, Margaret recommended. I was feeling nauseous. These folks didn't give a damn about me. All they wanted was my money. Then I realized what I needed to do. I had to leave that house and these people behind. I needed to be in charge of my life. I would no longer be their victim. I had a plan when I left the hospital. When I arrived home, I knew what I had to do. Jack was waiting with his folks. They were all grinning, pretending to be the loving family. They weren't. We were quite concerned about you, Helen, Margaret cried out. I gave a nod but remained silent. I had to be normal so as not to give them away. Jack approached. When will you receive your inheritance then? He was a bit too eager to inquire. I gave him a glance. I realized I didn't even recognize the man I thought I loved. I said it will be soon, but you shouldn't worry about it. His smile wavered slightly. But Helen, we're married. I mean, what's yours is mine. I made an effort to grin. Oh, sure, sweetheart. I had trouble sleeping that night. I could hear their voices in my mind. Their avarice, their phony concern. I felt ill from it. I stood up and began to write. I documented all of their actions, all of their words. It like a dam breaking, and years of repressed anguish and annoyance burst forth. I met with a lawyer the next morning. I described everything, presented the prenuptial agreement to him, Despite his disbelief, he claimed that the arrangement would keep me safe. He told me, "You're doing the right thing." Jack and his dad were in the living room when I returned. When I stepped in, they glanced up. "Our courageous girl is there." With a smile that stopped short of his eyes, Richard remarked. I grabbed my handbag and sat down. "I want to share something." They all gave me interested looks. "I'm going to file for divorce." My voice was steady as I spoke. There was silence in the room. Margaret then burst out. "What? You're a little ungrateful." Jack stood up. "You can't be serious, Helen." "Jack, you know we adore you. Therefore, I don't experience love." I felt exploited. Margaret was furious. "We'll bring legal action against you. Half of your inheritance will go to us." I took out a copy of the prenuptial agreement from my handbag. "You can't, in fact. According to this, in the event of a divorce, none of us may claim the other's property." They couldn't speak. I felt like I was in charge for once. I got to my feet. "I'm going. None of you should get in touch with me." I left the residence. Behind me, there are yells and taunts. I had never done something so difficult. However, I felt as though a burden had been lifted as I drove away. I was free. Free from their manipulation. Free from their contempt. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I had no idea what lay ahead, but I knew it had to be better than the past. In the city, I leased a modest flat. It was mine, but it wasn't fancy. In years, for the first time, there was a calmness about me. Even though I was still coping with the divorce, I thought I could manage. The attorney called me one day. "Helen, there's something you should know about your great-aunt's will." I couldn't understand. "How about it?" "A condition exists. A percentage of your inheritance must be donated to a worthy charity." It was the last thing your great-aunt wanted. I was taken aback. I didn't know. The attorney went on. "She was a really generous person. She must have wanted to tell you that." I ended the call. My great-aunt had given me an opportunity to do something nice while she was deep in meditation. It seemed to be a sign, a push in a new direction. I began looking at issues and charities. I wanted to take part in something significant, something that would change things. At that point, I came into a tiny group that assisted women who had been abused at home. It resonated with me. I got in touch with them and arranged a meeting. Linda, the lady I met, was devoted and passionate. For women who have nowhere else to turn, we offer counseling, legal assistance, and refuge. Linda explained. Her stories touched me as I listened. I want to assist. I spoke with a purpose I hadn't had in a long time. I utilized a portion of the bequest to finance a new refuge under Linda's direction. Knowing that I was assisting other women in finding a path out, just as I had, was an amazing sensation. Linda asked me to attend the shelter's launch a few weeks later. It was a small event, but the atmosphere was full of hope and gratitude. I saw a familiar face in the crowd as people mixed. Sarah was the one, a longtime library coworker. "Helen? Is that you?" Startled, she asked. "It's been so long, Sarah." I hugged her as I said. "Why are you here?" she inquired. I informed her of my participation with the shelter. Her eyes widened as she listened. "That's amazing, Helen." "I didn't know. For me, it's a new chapter." Grinning, I said, "We caught up during the evening." Reconnecting with an old acquaintance was pleasant. I had the impression that my life was gradually coming back together. As the event wrapped up, Linda arrived. "Helen, I can't thank you enough. Life will be changed by this refuge." The faces of the women who now had a safe place to go caught my attention. "The least I could do was this," I remarked, feeling a warmth in my heart that I hadn't felt in a very long time. The days were indistinguishable from one another, each packed with the gratifying job at the shelter. I was discovering something that was really mine, a new sense of purpose. Then my phone rang without warning. I hadn't seen that number in a long time. Jack's. Curiosity triumphed over the range of feelings racing through my heart. "Hi there, Jack." My voice was calm as I said, "I need to speak with you, Helen. Is it possible for us to meet?" "It's critical." He sounded desperate in his speech. I reluctantly accepted his invitation to meet in a public coffee shop in the hopes that being in a familiar setting would help me feel stronger. When he sat opposite Jack, he appeared different, defeated, almost pathetic. He had beseeching eyes. "I made a big mistake, Helen. I want you to return." I've come to understand how much I value you. He spoke without thinking. I felt nothing but disdain as I gazed at him. Jack, why now? He let out a sigh. My folks. Everything was under their control. Our marriage didn't work out because of them. I was feeble. But now I'm different. Anger shot through me. You hold your parents responsible. You watched them treat me like garbage. Jack, you shared their laughter. He grabbed for my hand, but I jerked away. Helen, please. I realized my mistake. I've evolved. Whether he had changed or not, I still felt nothing as I gazed at the guy I had once loved. It's too late. Jack, I have no sympathy for you. Only disdain. For a brief time, I had a glimpse of the guy I married as his face collapsed. However, it was short-lived. I apologize, Jack. I've moved on. Now I have a life, a goal. It doesn't have room for you. I spoke aggressively. With a look of despondency on his face, he nodded slowly. I get it. I simply had to attempt to leave the coffee shop. A burden was lifted from my shoulders. It was done. It's really over. There was an event at the shelter the next day. A sculpture donated by a local artist was scheduled to be unveiled in the garden. I felt like I belonged there, surrounded by people who believed in me and supported me. Sarah. Beside me was my former library colleague. Helen, you've accomplished something truly remarkable. Grinning, she said. The sculpture's cover was removed by the artist, exposing a woman's figure grasping for the sky. It represented power, optimism, and fresh starts. Applause flooded the air, and for a minute, everything was right in the world. The woman who had been so helpful to me, Linda, came over. This is only the beginning, Helen. We have so much more to do. I knew she was correct when I saw the hopeful faces all around me. I was prepared to totally embrace this new beginning of mine. I had a busy and rewarding new life. At the shelter, there were fresh challenges and rewards every day. I became more self-assured and felt in charge of my future for the first time in years. I even began taking courses in self-defense, something I never would have thought to do previously. I once noticed a vehicle parked outside the shelter as I was leaving. It was Margaret, my mother-in-law, and she left as soon as she spotted me. We need to talk, Helen, she continued in a gentler voice than I had ever heard. Margaret, I said steadily, I have nothing to say to you. Just listen to me, please. I see now how foolish we were, she begged. I paused and gave her a glance. Although she looked sincere, I couldn't let go of the past. Margaret, what do you want? I'm sorry. I was terrible to you. As a result, I lost my son. Additionally, I don't want to lose you. I never had a daughter like you. With tears in her eyes, she spoke. Something gave me a stab of pain. Maybe sympathy, but I ignored it. You made my life a miserable nightmare, Margaret. That won't alter with an apology. I think you should move on, just as I have. I spoke aggressively. I retreated when she stretched out to me. Helen, please. I want to put things right, even though I know I can't change the past. I gave a head shake. For that, it is too late. Margaret, goodbye. I could feel her eyes on my back as I turned to go. However, I didn't turn around. There was no turning back now that I had learnt to advocate for myself. Jack's attorney sent me a letter the following day. The divorce settlement was being contested by him. I was prepared, but I wasn't shocked. I met with my lawyer, a bright woman named Rachel. Helen, he has no leg to stand on. There is clarity in the prenuptial agreement. He's just trying to scare you, she asserted. I gave a nod. He no longer frightens me. Let's take this on. When the court date finally came, I entered with a confident demeanor. Jack and his attorney were present, and our gazes briefly locked. I saw a glimpse of the old Jack I had loved, but it was gone in an instant. After hearing both arguments, the judge rendered her judgment. Jack's claims were rejected, and the prenuptial agreement remained in effect. A wave of relief and victory washed over me. After the court hearing, Jack approached me. Helen, I'm sorry I was incorrect, he remarked, his voice low. I saw the man I had previously loved, but now had no feelings for when I looked at him. Jack, goodbye, I murmured to myself. Take care of yourself, and left the courtroom. I felt a feeling of closure. I had finally closed that chapter of my life, and a new one was just getting started. I was completely focused on organizing a benefit for the shelter. The community's support was tremendous, and I was quite appreciative. When the benefit night finally arrived, the venue was a hive of activity. People have gathered to support our cause from all walks of life. As I glanced around, I realized how far I had gone from a shy, timid lady to someone who spoke up for herself and others. "Helen, you did it! This is incredible!" Sarah remarked as she approached me. I grinned. "We succeeded! And there's still a ton of work to be done." I experienced a feeling of purpose and success as the event progressed. I was right where I was supposed to be, and this was my life today. Story 3. My brother told me that I was only the driver when I took my family to the hotel, and everyone laughed as they revealed they had only booked a room for 4 people. Parents, brother, and his wife. I calmly replied, "No problem." After making one phone call, I departed. They were in a 35-story stall in the hotel lobby of a contemporary glass office building in Manhattan, New York. Ashley Holmes was standing in front of a big window on the upper floor. It was December 23rd at 3 p.m. She patiently watched as the falling snow converted the typically bustling financial district into a serene, silvery realm. Her desk was buried underneath investment analysis reports for the fourth quarter of the year, and her walls adorned with numerous awards as a financial analyst. At 35, Ashley was recognized as one of the most exceptional senior analysts at the investment bank. "Will it really go well tomorrow?" she muttered to herself with a sigh, her usually confident expression wavering. It had been 15 years since her father's demise. During that time, Ashley had immersed herself in her work to sustain herself. Her $150,000 salary and well-managed savings were evidence of her hard work. On her phone, a fresh notice showed up. It was the latest Instagram post from her brother Brian, showing off a new Rolex with the caption, "Life is great, luxurious living, happy family." "Another brand new timepiece?" Ashley frowned. As though it would last forever, her brother had been wasting their father's inheritance. Vanessa, his wife, was similar in that she shared images of high-end purses and accessories virtually every day. Her mother Hillary and stepfather Douglas also lived a lavish life in an upscale residence in Florida. Ashley had received a call from her mother the night before, as usual, regarding money. "Ashley, listen." Her mother's voice had a saccharine tone. "Brian wants to buy a new automobile. He needs a down payment." "All fine, I'll transfer it again," Ashley answered, evidently having acceded to such inquiries many times before. She supported her parents' extravagant lifestyle and assisted her brother financially. From her desk drawer, she brought out a snapshot the last Christmas with her father. The picture was taken in the hospital, and though he was frail, he had a warm smile. "Dad, I'm trying hard," she muttered to the photo before diverting her focus to a reservation. Confirmation next to it. The high-end resort in the Aspen Mountains, Skied Up Lodge. For the Christmas season, she had reserved 34 suites at $800 per night, for a total of roughly $10. Oh. It was a significant decision, even on her income. This trip wasn't just a family vacation for Ashley. It was the last chance to mend her relationship with her family by bearing all costs and creating time to spend with the entire family. She hoped something might change. The office phone rang. It was a confirmation call from Skytop Lodge. They wanted to make final arrangements for her stay starting tomorrow. Ashley straightened up, switching to her usual professional mode. "Indeed. This is Ashley." Regarding tomorrow's matter, while on the phone, Ashley looked out the window again. Anxiety and excitement were mixed together in the middle of Ashley's room on a winter afternoon. A Louis Vuitton suitcase was only half packed on the bed. She folded a dark green cashmere sweater that she would wear the following day, while not a $30,000 sweater. Its high-quality material and simple design matched Ashley's interests and life philosophy. "Is this the right outfit?" she mumbled, clutching the dark green sweatshirt on her breast in front of the mirror. Vanessa always wore the latest designer brands, and her mother had grown to prefer flashy clothes to match Douglas's luxurious tastes. The phone rang. William was the one. "Is everything progressing?" His voice carried its usual kindness tinged with concern. "Yes," basically, Ashley said, sounding a bit fatigued. "I've given the staff at Skytop Lodge special instructions. Contact me immediately if anything happens. William was a renowned hotel chain owner in the U.S. and Sky Top Lodge was one of his luxury resorts. They had met at an investors conference 2 years ago and had been building a steady relationship since. Thank you, but it'll be okay, Ashley said as she headed towards the window. I believe this time will be different. Something will change because of this trip. After hanging up the phone, Ashley sat down on the sofa in her living room. On the coffee table was a photograph of her final moments with her father. It was 15 years ago, just before her father passed away in a white hospital room. Her emaciated father had gently held Ashley's hand and said, "You're strong. You're the only one I can trust to take care of the family." With such words in her heart, Ashley had studied diligently, graduated from college with outstanding honors, and made her way up in the world of finance. She worked as hard as her male colleagues and earned the position of senior analyst at an investment bank in her early 30s. After their father passed away, her brother Brian left college and continued to live off the inheritance with his stepfather's approval. After getting married, he and his wife Vanessa maintained a luxurious lifestyle. Ashley's smartphone vibrated with a message from Brian. "You're picking me up tomorrow morning, right? Don't oversleep." His typically arrogant tone came through, even in text. Ashley briefly replied, "Of course." She had mixed feelings about using her own car for transportation. Typically, Brian used expensive cab services and seldom ever drove his own car. It was past 10 o'clock when I looked at the clock. She had to pick up her family early the next morning. Ashley sighed as she began to organize the rest of her luggage. Whether it was anticipation for tomorrow, her heartbeat quickened slightly. Looking at her father's photo one last time, his smile seemed encouraging. "Tomorrow will surely go well," she murmured to herself as she headed to the bedroom. It felt it would take a while to go into a quiet slumber, with a mix of eagerness and concern about the next day. On Christmas Eve morning, Manhattan was enveloped in a silvery world of snow. The clock showed 6 a.m. Ashley woke up before her alarm clock sounded. She took a deep breath and got out of bed, telling herself that today was the day. She woke up 30 minutes earlier than planned, which was actually better. She wanted to be properly prepared before picking up her family in front of a huge mirror in the bathroom. Ashley carefully applied her makeup around her neck. She wore a single diamond necklace that was a keepsake from her father. Ashley's modest yet sophisticated clothing was a subtle representation of her ideal self, the self-assurance she had built up over the course of her 35 years of existence, and her fear about the future. The underground parking garage of her luxury apartment building was quieter than usual. Most residents were probably still asleep on Christmas Eve morning. Ashley turned on her black Mercedes-Benz 550, which gleamed in the garage lights. The navigation system displayed the route. The first destination was the upscale apartment on the Upper East Side, where her mother and stepfather lived. From there, she would head to Brian and Vanessa's new home in Brooklyn. The roads were clear, but careful driving was necessary due to the snow. When she arrived at the Upper East Side, her mother, Hillary, was already waiting at the entrance of the apartment. Dressed in a showy scarlet coat and clutching a huge Gucci purse, her stepfather, Douglas, got into the back seat without a word. "Good morning, Ashley." Her mother's voice had a forced tone, as if welcoming a high-quality taxi driver. They then proceeded to the Brooklyn home of Brian and Vanessa. The couple had recently moved to an expensive area, despite rumors that their inheritance was running low, continuing to keep up appearances. "Ashley, you're late." Brian's voice carried his usual arrogance. Vanessa was dressed in a new Gucci coat holding a matching bag. Both appeared as if they had walked out of a fashion magazine with everyone on board. Ashley cautiously grabbed the wheel. Sitting in the passenger seat, Brian was continuously tinkering with his phone, most likely posting something boastful. The atmosphere inside the car was heavy. Apart from occasional whispers between Hillary and Vanessa, there was hardly any conversation. After about 2 hours of driving, the snow-covered peaks of the Pocono Mountains came into view, stunningly magnificent, and alleviated some of Ashley's strain. "You can see it now," Brian suddenly shouted. The luxurious structure of Skytop Lodge appeared amidst the snowy landscape. The grand building, styled in Italian Renaissance, displayed a stunning harmony with the surrounding nature. A giant Christmas tree decorated the front entrance, and illumination sparkled everywhere. Luxury cars arrived one after another and wealthy families alighted. When Ashley parked the car in front of the entrance, a uniformed bellboy approached. From that moment, everything began to change. "You've worked hard to get us here." Brian's voice, icy cold, resonated inside the car. Ashley twisted around to look at the back seat. There she saw her brother with a malicious smirk she had never seen before. Her mother, Hillary, and stepfather Douglas averted their gazes. As Vanessa gave a faint grin, Ashley instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen. "The driver's job finishes here. This hotel is exclusively for us, the real family," Brian said. Ashley was momentarily stunned. It felt as though the temperature inside the car had plummeted. "What are you saying?" Ashley's voice trembled slightly. "I made the reservations." "Oh, the reservations?" Brian scoffed. "They've already been changed just to our names." Her mother, Hillary, looked troubled but said nothing. Her stepfather, Douglas, continued to look out the window. Vanessa did not bother to hide her malicious grin. Everyone except Ashley got out of the car. Brian told the bellhop to grab the bags. Ashley slowly took out her smartphone. William's number was pressed while she made a conscious effort to keep her hands from shaking. After a few rings, his calm voice came through. "Hello, Ashley." "William, cancel the reservations." Ashley's voice retained an unexpected calm. "All of them, please." After a moment of silence on the other end, William seemed to understand the situation. "I get it. I'll arrange it right away." At that time, a staff worker in uniform approached from the front desk against the backdrop of pristine snow. The black uniform stood out sharply from inside the car. Ashley observed everything from the window. "I'm sorry, we cannot find your reservation." The staff member informed them. The smile vanished from Brian's face. Hillary began fumbling through her purse in a panic. Douglas turned to face the front for the first time. There must be an error. Hillary's anxious muttering was audible. Ashley slowly rolled down the car window. "It's no mistake." Ashley's voice was calm. "All reservations have been canceled." "Goodbye, Ashley." "Hold on." Brian's voice carried a note of desperation. "It's just a joke. You know that, right?" But Ashley had already started the engine and grasped the steering wheel in the rearview mirror. She observed her family standing bewildered. Vanessa's expensive boots sank into the snow. "Ashley," Hillary's voice faded with the wind. Slowly, the car pulled out of the hotel parking lot and started to backtrack. The snow continued to fall. A solitary tear ran down Ashley's face. It was more a tear of liberation than of sorrow. Her smartphone began to ring. It was Brian calling. She ignored it. Then followed a call from Hillary. Ignored as well. Messages started arriving one after another. "Why would you do this?" "It's Christmas Eve. You've embarrassed us. Will you refund the accommodation costs?" Ashley let out a small laugh at the last message. In the end, their focus was always in money, not in love or familial relationships. Pretends and computations only? Ashley made the decision to go to Williams's penthouse rather than her own apartment as she drove down the mountain toward the city. She felt a refreshing feeling of clarity, reflected from her expression in the rearview mirror. The streetlights gently lighted the falling snow, lending a serene tint to the joyous evening. The calm inside the car, free of any occupants in the rear, was unexpectedly soothing. Ashley's vehicle slid into William's penthouse's underground parking garage 2 hours later. As she entered the elevator, a warm feeling began to spread throughout her chest. It was clear to her that she was headed to the right place. When she opened the door to the penthouse, the warmth of the room and William's presence welcomed her. The fireplace was already blazing, softly lighting up the living room. "Ashley, are you okay?" William inquired, his voice filled with great caring. "Indeed." Ashley returned the smile. "Actually, I feel relieved." Ashley told him everything, and William listened patiently as he made 2 glasses of wine. Brian's sly grin, her mom, Hillary's averted eyes, and what she had done herself. "You made the proper decision, Ashley." From the couch facing the hearth, William gave her reassurance. "But I wrecked their Christmas because of me," Ashley muttered, gazing at the wine glass in her hand. "That is untrue." William's voice was soft yet forceful. "Their own Christmas was wrecked. You just safeguarded your own value." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. Rather, These were tears of relief from the years-long load she had been carrying. Her smartphone vibrated again. It was a message from Douglas, her stepfather this time. The whole family has been shamed by your selfishness. Don't ever show your face again. Ashley turned off her smartphone completely. She had never experienced the warmth of her family before, but William put his hand on her shoulder. From tomorrow, a new life begins, Ashley stated, peering into the flames of the fireplace. I will no longer allow anyone to meddle in my affairs. William gave a quiet nod. For Ashley, this was the most significant Christmas Eve ever. Her family was still with her. She had found herself again. The souvenir jewelry from her father softly gleamed in the light of the flame. Manhattan was engulfed in a gleaming white wonderland on Christmas morning. Snow continued to fall softly between the high buildings, quietly masking the events of the previous day, creating a postcard-like vista from William's penthouse windows. Good morning, honey. William was already brewing coffee when he met her. The scent of espresso permeated the room. This morning, I received a call from Skytop Lodge. William began in silence. It was quite a scene with your family, standing near the window with a mug held in her hands. Ashley answered coolly. That's what I anticipated. Brian must have made a scene. As soon as she turned on her smartphone, notifications flooded the screen. Over 40 missed calls. Almost 100 messages. With a few from Douglas, the most came from her mother, Hillary, and brother, Brian. Do you think this is okay, Ashley? I'll never forget how you made us seem foolish in a 5-star hotel lobby. You have no right to abuse us like this. How about this evening? Her mother sent the final message. We need to talk about money. Call me ASAP. Ashley let out a long sigh and put the phone away. William gave her a comforting embrace from behind. I've already decided. I'm prepared to face whatever comes next, Ashley said, liberated and empowered. Ashley's determination was evident as she turned to face William. I'm severing all connections with them, she said resolutely. William gave a quiet nod. His face conveyed his complete support for her choice. Are you certain about this? Gently, he inquired. After all, they are your family. No, they aren't, Ashley answered with conviction. A true family supports and understands one another. They were only strangers with a financial obsession. The two proceeded to the breakfast table where William had prepared croissants and scrambled eggs, a modest but meaningful meal. Ashley had been looking for happiness, and this was it. Ashley Williams looked genuinely at Ashley and added, I have a proposal for you. How about we share a home? Ashley was stunned for a second, the snow slowly falling outside the window. Let's start a new life here together, William proposed, his words bringing tears to Ashley's eyes, tears of gladness at being released from the false shackles of family and discovering a new real one. Yes, Ashley grinned. William, that sounds fantastic. At that moment, her phone started ringing once again. Mom appeared on the screen, but Ashley didn't hesitate any longer. She took up the phone and totally blocked her mother's number, followed by Brian and Douglas. I've taken a new step, Ashley stated with a clear and cheerful face. William answered with a loving smile. A severe cold wave struck Manhattan in mid-January, shortly after the New Year, from the window of Ashley's office. In the cold north wind, the cityscape appeared to tremble. Mizuho, there's a visitor for you in the lobby. The voice on the intercom was that of her secretary. Miss S. Hillary Brown is here. Above the keyboard, Ashley's hands hesitated. Brown, Hillary. Since that Christmas Eve, she had not heard her mother's name before. I get it. I'll be right there. Ashley answered, her voice quivering a little. In the first-floor foyer of high-rise buildings, Ashley's high heels reverberated on the marble floor as she braced herself for the reunion with her mother. Her mother was seated on the guest sofa, not in her normal flamboyant clothes, but in a modest greatcoat. She was obviously tired, as evidenced by the muted makeup. Could I enter? The old haughtiness was gone from her mother's voice. After giving her mother a slight nod, Ashley escorted her to the elevator. When they got to the office, Ashley motioned for her mom to take a seat on the reception area sofa. Outside, light snow began to dance in the air. I needed to chat, so I came here. Sitting across from Ashley and sharing a cup of coffee, her mother began in a low voice. We're at our breaking point. Ashley had anticipated it well. After years of lavish living, her father's estate was all but gone. Her stepfather's real estate ventures had failed, and they were now overwhelmed with debt. Brian was struggling to pay for his new car and was behind on rent. "We require assistance." Her mother's voice trembled. "Is money at stake, Mom?" Ashley asked in a relaxed tone. "Yes," her mom said reluctantly. "For Brian's vehicle loan, Mom, and living costs each month. That's sufficient." Ashley cut her off. "I'm not the family bank anymore, Mom. I have made the decision to live my own life." Ashley's eyes showed a firm resolve, while her mother's look was cloudy. "We are family, though. In any case, what is true family?" Ashley inquired softly. "During Christmas, you all treated me like a chauffeur. You said nothing when Brian gave me that bitter smirk. Is that family?" There was a thick silence in the room. Hillary, her mother, spoke tearfully. "Listen, Ashley, I'm in serious danger right now, but I really apologize for what transpired that day. I need your assistance." Ashley slowly stood up and walked to the window, gazing out at the view. In the background was the building her father used to run. "Mom, go home," Ashley replied without turning around. "Additionally, don't return. My life is mine." "Ashley, Mom, goodbye." Her mother stood up silently, though it appeared like she wanted to say more. The room reverberated with the sound of the door closing. Ashley sighed heavily as she returned to her desk and stroked her father's remembrance jewelry. Her chest felt a little lighter, which was odd because it was heavy. The coming of spring has altered the Manhattan view from the window of William's apartment. The park was alive with blooms in full bloom. Ashley stared at the view while holding her morning coffee. "What are you thinking about, Ashley?" William inquired gently from behind her. "Just a bunch of things." Ashley turned to smile in response. "My life has changed a lot in the last 3 months." The changes were substantial, in fact. She had been promoted to head of her department at the investment bank and had told William she was engaged. Her abilities were completely appreciated as the team leader for a new project. There had been no contact from her mother, and Brian's flamboyant social media posts had gone. A coworker later informed her that they had downsized from a lavish apartment to a more affordable one. "Now enjoying a simpler life. Do you have any regrets?" Standing next to her, gazing at the cherry blossoms, William posed the question. "Not a single one. I've decided to go this route." Ashley touched her father's memento necklace in response. "Blood ties aren't the exclusive definition of true family," Ashley pondered. "It's about supporting and understanding one another." At dusk in a fancy restaurant where she had met William, "He had important news," William said with joy. "We're going to grow with a new hotel chain on the West Coast. Additionally, I would like you to serve as an investment advisor." Ashley instantly gave a nod. Work and private life. Everything was settling into its ideal equilibrium. She sensed something. A fresh start for our lives. Ashley raised her glass. "Indeed. Our existence." William clinked his glass with hers and grinned. The sound of the bell was like the start of a fresh chapter. Story 4, Emma is my name. Liam, the 20-year-old son of Jack and myself, is currently enrolled in college. For years, we've been saving and working hard to keep him there, taking shortcuts, forgoing holidays, and all else we can to give him a chance at something more. My grandma went into a nursing facility, leaving us the house she left behind. It's spacious, comfortable, and unpretentious. It's just like home. I run the front desk at a doctor's office, and Jack works at the neighborhood hardware shop. We are content to live a simple life without many luxuries. The sun was hanging perfectly on a Thursday afternoon, caused you to consider ending the day early. Then Jack's phone rang, interrupting. "What do you think about an early weekend?" Remember, I was slicing carrots, half on a list of bills that needed to be paid, half on dinner. I heard him respond. "Hi, Mother, reduce your speed." "What's the matter?" As he heard, his face turned white. Talon Hand was pacing, and I halted what I was doing. He seemed scared as he hung up. He sank into the couch as if his strings had been severed and murmured, "That was my dad. Their company went bankrupt. Everything is gone for them, even the home." My heart fell. "Jack, oh, that's awful. How do they intend to proceed?" "They'd like to stay with us." "Only for a little while. Until they sort something out," they said. I paused as I considered our already limited budget and the impending disruption to the peaceful routine of our lives. What did you say to them? He was clearly anxious because he massaged his neck. I informed them that I spoke with you initially. It's your home. Emma wouldn't tell you that without first confirming. Helen and Frank, Jack's parents, they weren't the laid-back high flyers used to luxury. Furthermore, our basic arrangement was very different from what they were used to. Jack, you know how they are. It's not their style, this place. I am aware that he appeared uncomfortable. However, they are my parents, Em. They're stranded. Reflecting on all of their visits, noses showed up at our little home. It was obvious that they wouldn't fit in here. However, my willpower weakened when I pictured them in such a severe situation that they would seek assistance. Okay, they are welcome, but this is just temporary, isn't it? Only until they're able to stand again. Mom, Emma, and I had a brief, hushed conversation when he took up his phone and dialed. You can stay here for a while, but only until you find somewhere else to stay. I understand. We're not in charge of a hotel. Jack seems reticent, but I couldn't hear what was being said on the other end. Indeed, ma'am, we are unambiguous. Gave me the main idea. He hung up and let out a long, heavy sigh. They are appreciative. Next week, they'll be here. Jack told his parents last week that they could spend some time with us. They were also moving in today. I swear my heart fell as I saw two enormous trucks pull up our driveway from the porch. Like a parking lot attendant, Jack was out there directing traffic while maintaining a constant grin. Frank got out of the car first, grinning broadly, and gave Jack a back pat so forceful. You'd think he had won the jackpot rather than had moved into his son's house. Emma, sweetheart. Perfumed and vivacious, Helen came up to me and planted a kiss on my cheek that felt more like a branding iron. For allowing us to invade in this manner, you are an angel. I attempted a grin as I glanced at the pile of items they were unloading. No issue, Helen, but is this the end of it? Oh, these are only the necessities. As though our front yard wasn't already being engulfed by the stack of boxes and furniture, she waved a dismissive hand. We've stored the rest in essentials. I wager my time that if they were necessities, I wouldn't say anything hasty. The thought of what they had left behind made me shudder. I could tell Jack was thinking the same thing when he caught my glance. Then let's move the items inside. More than everybody else, Jack spoke to himself. With such power that you would believe they were moving into a palace, Frank and Helen gave the movers instructions. Not our weedy, humble house. The movers walked by, carrying innumerable boxes and armchairs. Would you believe it too? A grandfather clock. With their transient residence, who needs a grandfather clock? That's right. Boys. Simply put everything there. Frank gave instructions while indicating different locations across our living room, which was quickly being overtaken by their possessions. The movers took a break, so I drew Jack away. This is ridiculous, Jack. A complete house might be furnished with what they brought. Where will we store all of this? Jack gave his temples a massage. Yes, I am aware. I will speak with them. All right, let's just get today over with. As the movers went about their business, we moved back. The entire ground level was beginning to resemble the home of Frank and Helen. Every nook and cranny was occupied. Every available spot is occupied. Our once cozy living room had taken on the appearance of a storage container by the time the movers were finished. That evening's dinner was a flurry of activity. With all the mess, we hardly located the table. As they talked about their trip here, Frank and Helen appeared unaware of the disarray. Emma, you ought to sample this wine, Frank said as he opened a bottle of a French beverage that was likely more costly than our weekly food budget. Thank you very much, you two. With a voice as sweet as a cavity, Helen added her voice. Just till we get our bearings. Yes, regarding that, Jack cleared his throat. We must discuss certain ground rules. Oh, don't worry about that, son. There isn't much room. Frank dismissed him with a wave. We'll be all right. What do we, sweetheart? Helen nodded excitedly as he grinned at her. I glanced around at our occupied area, the boxes stacked high and the ornate decorations overpowering our basic ones. Handled perfectly. I wasn't really certain about that. It had taken some getting used to living with Frank and Helen, to put it mildly. They moved in a few days ago, and just when I thought we had gotten into a pattern, the kitchen turned into a new battlefield. As usual, I was preparing dinner on a Tuesday night. Something straightforward and filling. homemade tomato sauce over spaghetti. Helen waltzed into the kitchen as I was stirring the stew. She wrinkled her nose as though she had just entered a barn. What's that odor? Her tone was brimming with contempt as she questioned. Dinner is being served, I answered, trying to sound as calm as possible. It's spaghetti night. Spaghetti. She looked over my shoulder and sneered. Where's the meat? The fresh herbs? What you feed us is this. Jack entered while using a dish towel to wipe his hands after hearing the disturbance. What's wrong? With a glare that could make milk curdle, his mother turned to face him. We're supposed to consume this, which is the issue, Jack. She pointed to the seething pot as though it were a poisonous cauldron. Trying not to let her affect me, I inhaled deeply. We typically eat it. Steaks and nice dinners every night are out of our price range. Jack put himself in our way. Hard lines formed on his face. This is Emma's house, Mom, and we consume this. You can cook for yourselves if you'd want anything different. Yes, we will. Helen narrowed her eyes in response. And we depend on you to supply the food we need. This is not how we usually live. I'd had enough. I understand that you're accustomed to something else, but this is all we can do. Luxuries are out of our price range. Frank, who had remained quiet until then, spoke up with a loud voice. Then you might need to review your spending plan. We're not animals to eat scraps, young woman. Jack's mouth tightened. Dad, that's sufficient. We're trying our hardest. Everyone's shoulders are up around their ears and the roles are tense. Helen puffed at last. All right. We'll send you a rundown of our meals tomorrow. The next day, you may make sure it's here. Helen sent me a list as promised. Marble, beef new, seafood, natural. This. I brought that in. I studied the list. My heart is lowering. We had dinner with Frank and Helen that night. On the kitchen table between us was the list. We anticipate healthy meals. As if it were the most common request in the world, Frank remarked that the best fish were steaks made from marbled beef. Jack and I looked at each other in disbelief. We can't swing that, he remarked in a tired but strong voice. Our budget just does not allow for it. They reacted quickly and brutally. You two are lazy, Helen yelled. Not even able to serve a good supper at the end. Cornered, I gave in to their pressure. Jack and I survived on fast food to save money, but I started only purchasing the best goods for kids. My heart almost stopped when I sat down to perform the maths a month later. The cost of our meals has increased. Furthermore, our water bill had skyrocketed due to Helen's regular lavish bathing. Tonight was different, yet dinner had turned into a battleground. Helen and Frank were eating some expensive food. They had insisted on purchasing foreign seafood and marbled steaks. Jack and I, meanwhile, were seated across from them with plates full of the inexpensive, basic spaghetti. It wasn't simply our plates that were different. Every day, as they enjoyed another bite of their pricey meals, it was separating us more and more. I was at my breaking point. This must end. My voice was thick as I spoke. Halfway to her lips, Helen glanced up at her fork. Now, what are you discussing? We cannot continue to live this way. Eating separately. Distinct meals. It's absurd. We're keeping to what we can afford, and everyone in this family will eat the same from now on. The loud sound of Frank's laughter annoyed me. Do you think we'll eat that slop? It's not slop. Dinner is being served. We eat it. With my patience ebbing, I fired back. An expression of frown took the place of the amusement on Frank's face. Helen added, her voice piercing and accusatory. How are you able to be so lazy and greedy? It's not that difficult to cook good cuisine. With expectant looks on their faces, they both turned to Jack. Will you allow her to speak to us in your own home in this manner? The final straw was that. The dishes jumped as Jack's palm smashed down on the table. First of all, you will show Emma respect because this is her home. His remarks had a powerful impact. Helen's voice trembled as tears welled up in her eyes. You raising your voice at me surprised me. Your own mum. Frank stood pointing an accusing finger at Jack, his rage boiling over. Henpecked and dancing to her music, look at you. What have you turned into? Even though my heart was already racing, I refused to back down. This conversation is over from today. No more pricey steaks or seafood, we eat the same. Every one of us. For a brief period, their appearance could have frozen the room. Nobody made a move. Then Helen and Frank pulled back from the table and walked away without saying anything. The silence between Jack and myself hung heavy as we sat down again. He grabbed my hand and gave it a firm squeeze. "I'm sorry this is what happened." "So am I answered, feeling the weight of the evening descend about us. "It's the correct thing, though. This is not how we can live." After the big blow-up at dinner, things cooled down, but only on the surface. Frank and Helen were quieter, certainly, but there was a slyness to their quietness that set me on edge. I had a feeling they weren't going to take the new house rules lying down, and I was correct. It began quietly. After eating sandwiches for lunch a few days later, I was tidying up when the doorbell rang. I cleaned my hands on a towel and went to the front door, thinking I may see a neighbor or a box. But when I opened it, a delivery man was standing there with a big, fragrant bag from a fancy restaurant in town. He looked at his clipboard and stated, "Delivery for Emma." I was puzzled. There must be an error. This wasn't ordered by me. Just suddenly, Helen stood behind me. She smiled a little too broadly. "Oh, I took the liberty of ordering for us. We deserved a good supper, in my opinion, after all the recent agony." I scowled as I reluctantly accepted the bag. "We discussed this, Helen. We are reducing spending." She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "Dear, I assumed it was on your tab. It was my error." Jack heard us and came in from the kitchen. "What's happening?" "Your mother believed we deserved a costly lunch," I remarked, feeling as though the bag was suddenly heavier in my hands. Jack's expression stiffened. "Mom?" we concurred. "Don't do this again!" Frank's voice booming. He entered the corridor. "What's a little lunch going to hurt? We can't be expected to live monastic lives indefinitely." As I placed the bag on the table in the foyer, I could feel my fury rising. It goes beyond lunch. It's every meal and every additional cost. We are unable to pay. We promise to stay inside our budget. Helen's expression grew icy. "Well, I guess we won't bother if you're going to fuss over such a basic meal. Next time." Jack squeezed his nasal bridge. "It's not just about the dinner. It's about honoring the rules of the house. You can no longer continue to act behind our backs." After a few more minutes of back and forth, Frank and Helen left the pricey, uneaten meal on the table and retired to their room. Jack and I glanced at one another, the tacit agreement hovering between us that this couldn't go on. "I'll give the restaurant a call, let them know what's going on, and cancel any more orders that were placed without our permission." I picked up the phone and said. Jack gave a nod. He clenched his jaw. "I'll speak with them once more. This sly behavior must end." Following the event involving the unapproved meal, the peace didn't last long. You could cut the tension in the home with a knife, and Helen and Frank seemed to boil just beneath the surface. One evening, while I was doing the dishes, the communication broke again. Jack had just entered from the garden and appeared exhausted. The loud crash from the living room sent us both rushing just as I was ready to ask him about his day. One of the few decorations I truly cared about was a broken vase, which Frank was standing over when we arrived. "What took place here?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice level. "It slipped," Frank remarked, scarcely appearing remorseful. "Accidents happen, but his tone was all wrong. It was not contrite. It was rebellious." Jack leaned down to pick up the pieces, and I couldn't help but tell this vase was for my grandma. "I haven't been here as long as it has," Helen sneered from the doorway. "It's only a vase." "You can get another." "Helen, that's not the point." I felt my aggravation building and snapped. "Respect is the key, something that's obviously missing from this situation. Do you wish to discuss respect?" Frank's voice rose as he fired back. "What about respecting us? Treating us like second-class residents in this house?" Jack rose up, facing his father. "Dad, you're living here thanks to our kindness. Keep it in mind. Goodwill doesn't feel like it." Helen sharply added her own remarks. "Every day we feel like we're not welcome. Living in our home with Frank and Helen was like walking a tightrope. However, one night drove me over the edge. The dining table where we were seated had been the scene of innumerable conflicts. Now, when Helen nonchalantly revealed her newest bombshell, "Jack, sweetheart, I think we should use the college fund you established for Liam to purchase this beautiful coat that I discovered today." "As if to advise that we switch coffee brands," she remarked. I choked on my water, choking as I placed my glass down hard on the table. "Just what did you say?" I controlled my voice, a mixture of incredulity and growing rage. Helen gave me a charming grin, obviously taking my surprise for obedience. Dear, it's only money. For college, Liam may always take out loans. I'm in dire need of a new coat. Jack slapped his fork down, having been quietly fuming next to me. That is not possible, Mom. The funds are intended for our son's schooling. There's nothing else we're doing with it. A frown distorted Helen's face. How can you turn down a straightforward request from your own mother? It's not easy, and that's the end of it. I snapped, felt the last of my patience dissipate. Frank added his voice. His voice became a yell. You're being cruel and irrational. Your family is us. Then he threatened, his tone calculating and frigid. Perhaps the local media would be curious about your family's treatment. Would your managers be interested in knowing? My stomach churned with a mixture of anger and terror. We couldn't cave sufficiently, though, I knew. I stood up and yelled back. Family members don't treat one another like this. You two need to move somewhere else. This isn't functioning. As Frank persisted in making allegations and threats, Helen broke down in tears while seeming to be the victim. Jack and I were left in startled silence as they stormed out of the room after the supper. I went to the bedroom and called my grandma once the place was silent. After a few rings, she answered, her voice reassuring. It's Emma, Grandma. My voice was full with emotion as I spoke. What's wrong, dear? Her tone was instantly alert as she inquired. I expressed all of my demands, threats, and the impossibility of the scenario involving Helen and Frank. She did not interrupt as she listened. In the background, her soft hums provide a constant sense of assurance. There was a momentary silence when I was done. Then, decisively, she said, I'll spend a few months staying with you. Are you sure, Grandma? How about the assisted living facility? You seem to need me there, I'm sure. Furthermore, I don't stand by and watch my family suffer. With a determined tone, she declared. It seemed like a rush of fresh air entered the home when Grandma arrived. Her energy remained as fierce as ever, even if she was older and moved a little more slowly. Frank and Helen were plainly taken off by her abrupt arrival, their discomfort apparent as day. I'll be staying on the ground level, Granny stated firmly, the moment she rolled through the door. Her baggage followed behind her like a faithful dog. I anticipate that some items may need to be relocated. Frank attempted a grin, trying to hide his annoyance. Naturally. Willn't we make you comfortable, Helen? Helen gave a rigid nod. Her eyes darted about, presumably figuring out what they would have to conceal or move. I felt a wave of relief go over me. Finally, someone was putting them in their place. As soon as the removalists were done moving the furniture around to accommodate Grandma, she called the family into the living room for a meeting. Emma has told me a lot about what's been happening here, and I'm not happy. Her harsh tone ripped through any feigned politeness as she started. Grandma lifted her hand to silence Frank as he opened his lips to object. I'm not done. I still own this house. In a technical sense, you are not entitled to the blood that has been drained from Helen's face, even if I have let Emma and Jack to reside here without paying rent. Do you want us to cover the rent? She sputtered. I do indeed. $4,000. Flatly, said Grandma. That's ridiculous. Frank sprang out of his chair and yelled. That's beyond our means. Well, considering the cost you've been racking up here, I'd say you can afford to cut back on your luxuries, Grandma retaliated. We are a family, though, Helen attempted, a little trembling in her voice. Family does not take advantage of one another, Grandma retorted. I believe it's only fair because you've been living a lavish lifestyle on my granddaughter's money. Helen and Frank looked at each other as though seeking an escape, but they couldn't think of anything to say. Grandma went on, and one more thing. You are free to look for another place to reside if you feel that the rent is too excessive. Or if you decide to stay, you'll offer me with daily help. I need someone to make sure I'm taken care of and assistance going about with food preparation. Helen's mouth was like a fish out of water, opening and closing. Her former bluster vanished entirely. Frank, who had always taken great satisfaction in his independence, appeared to have taken a blow to the belly. Consider it, Grandma completed, her voice softening just a touch. Your response must be received by tomorrow, Am. They went back to their room, perhaps to talk over their few choices. Grandma's face softened as she turned to face us. Kids, don't worry. We will resolve this situation. Grandma's new house rules were established the morning after. Frank and Helen appeared as though a switch had been flicked. I came into the kitchen to discover them packing their belongings. There is already a stack of boxes at the entrance. We've made the decision to leave. Without raising his eyes from the package he was sealing, Frank declared, "We located a little flat. We'll get our belongings and depart." Helen was more subdued, occupied with packing suitcases. She moved quickly and sharply. "It's best that way." She said something loud enough for me to hear, but nearly to herself. The remainder of the morning passed in a haze. Furniture and boxes were moved out the door. Jack volunteered more out of obligation than anything else. Their section of the home was strangely deserted by mid-afternoon. The reverberation of their leaving lingered. Grandma, who had been silently observing from her chair, gave me a knowing smile after they had driven away. "Okay, so there's it. They'll be all right, you know. To bring folks down to earth, a little pain is often necessary." Later on, we learned that they had sold the majority of their possessions to pay off their bills, including the rent. Like their new flat, the opulent lifestyle they were accustomed to was reduced to the necessities. Grandma spent 2 more weeks with us, a reassuring presence at home. Eventually, though, she made the decision to go back to her nursing home. I was both relieved and sad as I drove her back to the nursing home. "Grandma, thank you for everything. Without you, we couldn't have survived." She laughed and shrugged away my gratitude. "Oh, bullshit. You underestimate your strength. Just remember to stick up for yourselves. It won't be done for you by anybody else." I said her farewell with a hug and said I would see her soon. The house appeared larger and calmer when I arrived home. That night, we sat on our porch, the evening air chilly and delightful. Although life had taken us by surprise, we had recognized it, handled it, and were prepared to move on. We were certain that, with or without the consent of others, we could manage whatever happened next. Story 5. Whilst on a family holiday. In order to give my brother the bed, my parents instructed me to sleep on the couch. "That's funny because I reserved the penthouse apartment," I remarked with a chuckle. When the hotel manager made the announcement, their expressions fell. One thing I immediately learned as a child. There was nothing my younger brother Ryan could do wrong. My parents loved him. He was the golden kid, the person who received everything while I was treated like a second-class citizen. Birthdays. They had lavish parties, pricey presents, and a cake large enough to serve the entire neighborhood. I gave the youngster a half-hearted happy birthday and a cake from the grocery shop. University. My parents treated his education as if it were their life's work, pulling every thread, making every link, and throwing money at it. Me? To get by, I had to take out loans and work part-time jobs. Ryan always came first and I came second. He obtained what he desired. I was forced to struggle for scraps if I wanted anything. I swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, and accepted my status as the less significant child for years. However, it was on this trip that I made the decision to stop complying. The plan was to take the family to New York City for a vacation. The planning was done by my parents. Naturally, this meant that Ryan's needs came first. He had complete control over the restaurants, events, and everything else. To be honest, I wouldn't have gone if I hadn't heard my parents conversing one evening, and I was hardly even consulted. According to my mother, we don't have enough to reserve the suite. After that, we'll just place him on the couch. Without even mentioning my name, my dad answered, "Ryan requires a comfortable bed." Something inside of me suddenly exploded at that point. My age was 27. For the first time in my life, I had a reliable work, a healthy salary, and the ability to alter the course of events. So I did. We all showed up at the hotel on the day of the excursion. Located in the center of Manhattan, it was a magnificent 5-star establishment. If it weren't for Ryan's exacting criteria, my parents would never have reserved such a location. My mother added, "We have a reservation under Taylor," as she nonchalantly gave the receptionist her credit card as we stood at the check-in counter. After a moment of typing, the receptionist scowled. "Under that name, I don't find a reservation." The smile on my mother's face wavered. "That isn't feasible. Weeks ago, I reserved the executive suite." The receptionist gave a headshake. "I apologize, but there aren't any reservations in your name." I grinned as I leaned forward. "I made the reservation, which is why." My father's head jerked in my direction. "What?" I took out my phone, flipped the screen in their direction and displayed the email confirmation. Indeed. I decided to take care of the booking myself after hearing you people decide that I would be sleeping on a sofa like an unwelcome visitor. Quiet. The receptionist then grinned. Indeed, sir. We do have a reservation in your name. You are in the penthouse suite as well. My mom's mouth fell open. My dad blinked as if he was having trouble understanding what was being said. And, Ryan. Oh, Ryan seemed enraged. The penthouse, my mother stumbled. I gave a nod. Yes, as it happens, I earn a respectable living, so I reasoned that I may as well be comfortable if I was going on this vacation. The receptionist went on. The penthouse apartment has a private balcony overlooking Central Park, a master bedroom, a guest bedroom, and a full living space. My parents glanced at one another, then at me, and finally at Ryan, who appeared to be on the verge of a full-blown outburst. You're kidding. At last, my father said. I folded my arms. Not at all. I also get the master because I reserved the room. Where you wish to sleep is up to you two, Ryan frowned. You're not serious, I answered, enjoying this much too much. Oh, I'm very serious. My mother made an effort to take charge. I chuckled and said, all right, we'll just put an extra bed in the master and Ryan can. Oh, that's adorable. I don't have anyone sharing my bed. The king-sized master bedroom is all mine, but you guys are welcome to use the second bedroom and bring out the couch if you'd like. For the first time in my life, the realization became clear to me. I was in charge. They were unable to stop me from making the choices. However, this was only the start. I was in charge for the first time in my life. As the truth set in, Ryan and my parents remained still. I wasn't the weakling. They were accustomed to it. I allowed them to sit in shock and let the moment go on. After that, I took my room key from the desk, grinned at the receptionist, and thanked her. Now I'll go up. I left without waiting for them or asking if they needed assistance. And it felt amazing, darn it. Everything revolved around the penthouse apartment. There is a large living area, a complete dining area, a bedroom, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Lavish cushions, a magnificent king-sized bed, and a bathroom larger than several residences. Stretching out like I owned the universe, I took off my shoes, dropped my backpack, and lay over the bed. And then there was a knock, sharp and patient. I recognized the person already, I answered slowly. At last, I opened the door. First to enter was Ryan. My folks are just behind him. This isn't possible, Ryan yelled, like a kid whose favorite toy has just been taken away. I pressed myself up against the wall, crossed arms. What are you going to do? With a genuinely aggrieved expression, my mother added, take the best room. Ryan struggles to sleep in little beds, you know. I gazed at her. That seems to be a Ryan issue. My father sighed. We are a family. We ought to remain united. We're a family now, huh? I laughed a little dryly. It's funny. When you guys agreed that I would be sleeping on the sofa, I don't recall you thinking about that. Quiet. Ryan then sneered. In any case, exactly which room am I in? I arched an eyebrow. Do you hear yourself? It's not a huge thing, come on, my father remarked, taking over. You don't even give a damn about such things. I moved slowly in his direction after pushing off the wall. You're correct. I didn't care before, because it didn't matter to care. Because Ryan always came first, regardless of what I did. I glanced between them. But you know what? I made the reservation, I covered the cost, and now I do give a damn. Ryan gave me a scowl. Quit behaving like a jerk. All you're doing is being petty. I chuckled once more. Oh, you're not aware of my petty tendencies. Stroking my mother's temples with her side. Where are we to sleep then? I gave a shrug. A second bedroom exists. My dad reminded out that it just had one bed. I grinned. Yes, it's strange how that operates. Ryan's fists tightened. I'm not going to sleep on a couch. I shrugged once more. It's not my issue. They stormed off. As they hauled their bags into the smaller room, I could hear them bickering and whispering down the hall. I took pleasure in a lengthy, steaming shower in my opulent bathroom, put on a robe and placed an order for room service. Mignon filet, wine dessert. As my family stewed in their annoyance, I stretched out on the private balcony and enjoyed the scenery. However, I knew this was not the end. Not with them. They refused to let this pass. I felt like a king when I got up the following morning. Slept in that bed like a baby. No regrets, no guilt. I then looked at my phone. Texts and missed calls. My mother gave me one. We must speak. Come have breakfast with us below. I let out a sigh. Naturally. All right, watch what they're planning. They were already seated a big spread in front of them when I arrived at the hotel restaurant. Fruit, eggs, and pastries. The process. Good morning. Sitting down, I said. My father cleared his throat. Let's go right to the point. I arched an eyebrow. Proceed. Mom bent over. We believe that reserving a larger suite that suits everyone would be ideal. It was there. The deception. Do you mean anything that Ryan finds effective? Flatly, I replied. She disregarded that. We can upgrade if we pool our funds. I took a drink of my coffee. What amount are you contributing? Quiet. Then my father let out a sigh. We hoped you would take care of it. I almost spat my drink out. I looked at them, and then I laughed sharply. You can't be serious. Ryan made an uncomfortable change. It's not really important. Have you paid for the penthouse yet? That's right. My funds. My decision. I reclined. You guys pay for a larger suite if you want one. Dad gave his temples a massage. How come you're being so tough? Why do you act as though I owe you something? I fired back. To make Ryan comfortable, you had little trouble pushing me into a couch. However, things become unfair the moment the roles are reversed. Ryan gave an eye roll. What a huge deal you're making of this. My voice was deadly calm as I turned to face him. Additionally, you have lived your whole life obtaining what you desire. Therefore, perhaps it's time you experienced what it's like to finish in second place. Quiet. After pushing his plate aside, Ryan got to his feet. In any case, I'm not going to do this. Mom sighed in spectacular fashion. I simply cannot comprehend your self-centered behavior. I gave a little chuckle. Selfish? I threw my napkin on the table and got up. You brought me up to be the one who always gave up what I wanted, always made place for Ryan, and always made concessions. I gave a head shake. No more. They sat there in disbelief as I turned and left. However, I had a gut feeling as soon as I entered the elevator. Neither they nor I were finished yet. I assumed they would pout for a bit, grumble among themselves, and finally come to terms with the fact that I was no longer going out of my way for them. However, they weren't finished, and I should have realized that. I made the decision to explore the city by myself that afternoon. I strolled around Central Park, got coffee at a small, peaceful cafe, and even stopped by a bookshop to look around. For the first time in a long time, I felt liberated. No commitments. I'm not expected to follow the line. I then received the SMS mom. Hello, my love. This morning has left us feeling awful. Could we have a family meal or treat to start over? I gazed at the display. I had no faith in it. It's a part of me, yet not at all. The half that foolishly continued to think they could change. Perhaps a thought. Perhaps they finally got it. This may have been an olive branch. So I texted back, even though I shouldn't have. Yes, the biggest error I've ever made. The setup. They chose a fancy steakhouse close to the hotel, quiet booths and low lighting, the sort of location where wealthy people chatted over expensive wine and business deals were done. My parents and Ryan were already seated when I got there, all suited up as though it were a formal occasion. Hello? As I slid carefully into the booth, I said. Mom grinned. Thank you very much for coming. Dad ordered a bottle of wine and waved the waiter. Ryan stirred his drink with his straw while remaining silent. There was a problem. I sensed it. Dinner got off to a typical start. Forced laughs and small conversation. They behaved well. Too pleasant. Too kind. My dad then cleared his throat midway through the meal. Thus, we spoke briefly with the hotel. I felt sick to my stomach. Mom smiled tightly at me. It turns out that your reservation was mixed up. I put down my fork. What? At last, Ryan said something. Yes. The penthouse suite was apparently overbooked by the hotel. I squinted. That's amusing. About that, I didn't receive any calls. Dad gave a shrug. Well, since we were the ones who first organized the vacation, they gave us a call. According to them, they may relocate you to a more sensible room. And that's it. I witnessed it. The trap. They lied to the hotel. I told them that room wasn't meant for me. most likely claimed that I booked it accidentally or that it was an error. I breathed out slowly. You were manipulating the motel. Mom grabbed my hand. This whole thing has gotten out of hand, darling. All we want to do is repair it. Ryan grinned. Well, let's simply return, change rooms, and call it a day. It was there. The true cause of everything. They had no regrets. They weren't. They only wanted me to return to their authority. I'm back where I was. I crossed my arms and leaned back. No, Mother. The smile wavered. What? I cocked my head. No, I said. Dad rubbed his temples and moaned. Why are you complicating this? Ryan laughed. Just take the smaller room, dude. It's not really important. I gave a sharp chuckle. Not a huge concern. You three tried to steal my reservation, lied to the hotel, and went behind my back. And you're so bold as to suggest that I'm the issue? When Mom tried to control me, her voice fell into that soft yet firm tone she always used. It's just what's fair, honey. I gazed at her. Just? It was a bitter word. I got up and pushed away from the table. Do you wish to discuss fairness? Treating me as an equal throughout my life would have been fair. Respecting the fact that I reserved that fucking sweetie would have been fair. Fair would be refraining from using deceitful tactics to obtain what you desire. There was silence in the restaurant. People were looking at each other. Excellent. Permit them. I took out some cash from my wallet and threw it on the table. Savor your meal. I'll be in my penthouse at the hotel. After that, I left. By the time I returned, I was incensed about the fallout. I strode directly to the reception area. The hotel manager grinned as he looked up. My last name is Mr. Good night, I interrupted him. Regarding my reservation, did my parents call? His grin wavered. They did, I'm positive. With a sharp voice, I said, what exactly they told you is what I want to know. He paused, then let out a sigh. They said you had accidentally reserved the suite when you should have been in a regular room, and they were taking care of the change for you. I tightened my jaw. And you thought they were real? They appeared to be quite certain, so I opened my email. I've attached my reservation, payment confirmation, and account name. This room was reserved by me. My stay is not under my parents' control. His face went white. Oh, deadpan, I repeated. This is what is going to occur. You won't be altering my reservation, to start. In order to prevent them from requesting my room in the future, you are also blocking their account. Third, I leaned closer. In addition to taking my business elsewhere if someone tries to handle my reservation again, I'll make sure that every review site is aware of how this hotel allows manipulative family members to take advantage of visitors. His gaze expanded. I get it, sir. I'll deal with it right away. Indeed, he would. The last blow. I poured myself a drink, went upstairs, and locked the door to my suite. Then my phone began to explode. Why would you do that, Mom? All we wanted to do was assist. That was totally unnecessary, Dad. We were embarrassed by you. Ryan, whoa. The entire trip was ruined by you. Selfish. The first stared at the messages. After blocking all three, I relaxed and relished my penthouse. I felt great when I woke up the following morning. Knowing that my parents and Ryan were crammed into their small room, I stretched out in my king-sized bed and reveled in the sheer luxury of my suite. Poor. I looked at my phone. It's still banned. Excellent. I wasn't finished, though. They believed they could be dishonest. They believed they could control me and escape punishment. Oh, who were they playing with? They didn't know. The last setup. I walked down to the concierge after getting dressed and getting my money. Good morning. My last name is Mr. Grinning, the concierge remarked. I returned the smile. Please do me a favor. Could you arrange for me to have a spa day, complete care, facial and massage, the process? Additionally, is it possible to charge it to my parents' room? The concierge paused. I would need to verify whether I managed to slide a clean $100 note over the counter. She accepted it. Naturally, sir, following my completely reimbursed spa treatment. Thank you, parents. I selected a few mementos from the hotel's upscale shop. A silk tie I didn't need, an absurdly expensive leather wallet, and a fancy watch. Everyone rushed to their room. They needed to experience what it felt like to be exploited. The icing on the cake that night. I dialed the front desk. Hello. I would want to arrange for my parents to have a romantic meal in their room. The receptionist became more cheerful. That sounds very beautiful. We can offer rose petals, candles, and champagne. Excellent. Are you able to accommodate two people? She paused. Just two. I smiled. Indeed. Two. There's no need to mention my brother. She stopped, then burst out laughing. I get it. My mother texted me an hour later. Why is our room hosting a romantic supper, Mom? Where's Ryan's dinner? I grinned as I took a drink of my wine. I apologize. You usually prioritize Ryan, so I figured you'd like some alone time with him. No answer. The hotel manager then called my last name, Mr. At the front desk, your parents are requesting an explanation for the charges made to their room. I smiled. I hope they like their snacks, you tell them. Oh, and confirm that the charges cannot be reversed. They did tell you that they were taking care of my room problem after all. Quiet. The manager then chuckled. I'll see to that, sir. The tipping point. I was lounging on my own patio that evening, taking in the beauty of the city, when I heard a loud tap on my door. I recognized the person, I answered slowly. At last, I opened the door. My parents were standing there, furious. Ryan hung sullenly behind them. Do you believe you're accomplishing something? My father lost his temper. I rested my weight on the door frame. Oh, I'm simply treating you all the same as you have treated me throughout my life. My mother's cheeks flushed. You billed our room hundreds of dollars. I grinned. Oh, do not be concerned. Are you managing it correctly? My father balled his fists. This is immature. I gave a shrug. So was attempting to take my room and lie to the hotel. So was always prioritizing Ryan. I folded my arms. You understand how it feels now, Ryan whispered. This is crazy. I gave him a direct look. Do you believe this to be crazy? Imagine being the child who consistently came in second. Imagine being left with nothing while your sibling is given everything. I inhaled deeply. This mess was created by you folks. All I'm doing is making sure you move in at last. Unable to speak, they stood there. After that, I grinned, took a step back, and began to close the door. Have fun in your small space. Click. The door is locked. The fallout. Ryan and my parents departed the motel early the next morning. Didn't even bid farewell. I didn't get disturbed at all during my entire trip. The hotel manager smiled at me as I checked out. When your parents left, they appeared to be quite upset. I grinned. Excellent. I then gave him another gratuity to ensure that no one ever touched my room. One last thing. I haven't spoken to Ryan or my parents in months. The quietest I've ever been. What's the best part? The luxury timepiece is still with me. I forced them to purchase me, and I always grin when I wear it, because I won for